This collection must begin with a warning. If you feel that stories about the worst kind of humans would distress you, trigger you, or cause you any form of unease, then perhaps skip this video. I'm talking about parents, neighbors, teachers, etc. in this one. Some of these were pretty upsetting to translate and to read. So please consider this before continuing. When I was in kindergarten, I was forced to swallow a thumbtack. I want to share my experience on the off chance that it might help someone out there. It's a long shot, but I figured, why not? When I was a kid, I went to a kindergarten in a school called the Sakura Group. My teacher had one simple rule, and that was, you cannot tell a lie. There was even a weird song about it that the teacher made us sing in the morning at school. I can't remember the words, perhaps because I wish to forget them, but to my recollection it went something like this. If you tell a lie, you have to swallow 1,000 needles. We sang that song all the time. I never liked it. The meaning inferred was that if you break a promise or a lie, then you will be hurt just as much as the person you lied to will be hurt. It was a very old rhyme from the 1800s. When I was in kindergarten, I didn't really understand the meaning of the song. You know, kind of like Red Riding Hood. You never feel bad for the grandma. It just happens. Sometimes in class, we watched a kids' TV show called Mr. Noppo. I haven't seen it since kindergarten. Anyway, the episode we watched was about him making animals out of old milk cartons. We were allowed to do the same thing the next day in class, and I was really excited. So our teacher said, "Alright everyone, please bring in your milk carton tomorrow so we can make our animals. Don't forget to ask your parents when you get home. Don't forget, it's gotta be a milk carton." Everyone in the class, including myself, responded with, "Yes, miss." I got home as fast as I could and I asked my parents for a milk carton. My mum told me that we had only just opened the milk in our refrigerator, so I couldn't use that one. She then produced an empty soy milk carton from the garbage. She said it was the same kind of thing. The next day, I proudly brought my soy milk carton to kindergarten, but I was told that my milk carton wasn't right. When you think about it, the cartons are slightly different in perhaps the paper color or the thickness. Mr. Noppo from that TV show didn't tell us on TV how to make an animal out of a soy milk carton. He told us to use a milk carton. I guess that's why the kindergarten teacher got so angry with me that day. "Hey, this isn't a milk carton. Everyone in the classroom, including you, promised to bring in a milk carton to class today, right? Why have you brought something entirely different?" She scolded. I was too young, too shy, and too nervous to respond. I just sat there shocked. She turned to her desk at the head of the class, rooted around in her desk drawer, and then stormed towards my desk with something in her hand. Turned out to be a thumbtack case. She stopped at my desk with a half smile, and turned to the other children in my class and proudly declared, "Everyone, your fellow student has told a lie today. He promised to bring a milk carton, but he has brought something entirely different to class." So what do we do when somebody lies? Can anybody remember? That's right. They have to swallow 1,000 needles, don't they? I was so dumbstruck that I remained silent. I was half expecting it to be a big joke, but I could see by the look in my teacher's eyes that it was far from funny to her. It was unthinkable, yet happening. I couldn't say a word. She approached me and opened the case of pins and said, "You broke a promise. Get ready to swallow them." I couldn't. I couldn't. Look, everyone, he can't even commit to accepting his punishment, and the poor boy can't do it. When you think about it, 1,000 is too many, isn't it? Okay. That's okay. Don't worry. I'll change the rules. Just this one time. Not 1,000. but 100. Off you go." She hadn't forgiven me. She approached me with the pin in her hand. She held my nose and made me open my mouth. I thought I could escape her punishment if I pretended to swallow it, but it didn't work. I held the thumbtack between my back teeth and made a swallowing gesture. She looked at me and then slapped me in the face. The force of her slap caused me to spit out the thumbtack, and it tumbled down onto my desk. The classroom was so silent, it was as if you could hear a pin drop. She snatched up the pin and jabbed it at my nose. "Not even one! You can't even manage one! If you lie, this is your medicine. The other option is death. Everyone knows this. I'm trying to teach you the importance of not telling lies." She got so angry she dropped the thumbtacks all over the floor. I was made to find the thumbtack I had in my mouth. I remember crying, and the sound of my sobbing being the only sound in that classroom. The fun I assumed we would have that day creating animals out of milk cartons was destroyed. Everyone was looking at me with cold eyes, like I had caused all of this. And I was young enough to believe that it was my fault. The kindergarten teacher couldn't determine which thumbtack I had in my mouth, so she threw them all away. That was what saved me that day, I guess. I'm so glad I spat it out. I don't know if anyone else told on her. I never spoke about this until now. This happened many, many years ago. The laws and changes in school have been abundant since I was a kid, but the memories still stir up trauma in me. There's a long and established family-run restaurant in my hometown. I don't want to mention the name for fear of legal repercussions. My hometown is way out in the countryside. There aren't many businesses there. Everyone sort of knows everyone, especially the family who runs the restaurant. Their business has been around for generations. I don't have any friends in this town, and I'm okay with that. The restaurant family has an eldest son that I sometimes spoke to, but he was a few years older than me. He went to university, and I didn't see him for a while. About 7 to 8 years ago, that man damn near lost his mind. And 7 to 8 years ago was about the last time I saw him. Let me tell you what happened. It was late, but not that late. I was playing on my NES. Then, from nowhere, I heard this kind of moaning voice. Let me try and contextualize it for you. It sounded like a kid who is nagging their parent for a toy in a store. Something like a whine, but not one of pain. At first I thought it could even be the sound of a distant howling dog, but I quickly realized that it was human. It was really creepy since it was dark out, and there was nothing but open fields outside my window. I didn't like it at all, so I ran downstairs to tell my mum about what I heard. She opened our back garden doors and listened intently. She paced back and forth, restlessly trying to place the sound. I remember being nervous. It ended up not bothering my mum as much as it bothered me. I think she said, "Don't worry, it's just the sound of the outdoors," or something like that. So I went back upstairs to continue playing my game. But that moaning didn't cease. I hated it. It made my skin crawl, yet I was curious somehow. I moved over to my window and looked outside, in search of the source of that sound. I determined that the moaning was coming from the restaurant. Not the restaurant itself, but the building behind it. The building I assumed they stored their produce in. From my window, I could see a skylight over the building. I saw something moving around in there. Since it was dark, I couldn't see what was in the room beneath the skylight, but I could clearly see something that looked like it was human. And that human was making that sound. It was holding onto the window frame and shaking it as hard as they could whilst making that dreadful sound. I remember thinking it was like a human in a zoo. It was clearly trapped. I ran over and got my mother and told her to come and look. She said that she knew who that was. It was the eldest son from that restaurant family. I asked her for more details because I couldn't make sense of what I was seeing. My mother told me that from what she heard around the town, his mother pressured him into university. A prestigious university, no less. The pressures of achieving his parents' expectations were too much for him to bear, since they demanded nothing short of top grades. There was a rumor around town that he had a nervous breakdown, and no one had seen him since. So, it has been said that he was given a room in that warehouse. Well, perhaps a more accurate term might be confined to a room in that warehouse. The fact that their son has suffered with his mental health has embarrassed his parents, and apparently he is being hidden away to spare their blushes. Of course, these were nothing but rumors, but when I heard that moaning coming from the direction of that warehouse, I couldn't help but think that these were truthful rumors. All the while my mother was explaining this, he was rattling and wailing. He reminded me of my friend's hamster, the way it knew where the opening to the cage was but lacked the capacity to escape it. I said to my mother, "Let's go over there. It's not right what they're doing to him." My mother wanted nothing to do with it. I'm a female, and I was a teenager at the time, and I didn't want to do it alone, so I told my mother that I would call the police and have them deal with it. I was told not to cause an uproar, and just to ignore it. Deep down, I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't listen to that poor man go on moaning like that. I knew that no one else would do anything about it either, since the only house close enough to be in earshot of the warehouse was ours. I guess that's why my mum didn't want us to be the ones who complained. I mean, if that family did that to their own son, what would they be capable of doing to their neighbors? In a sense, I was the only one who could hear him, and I didn't want to let him down. I had to find the courage to go to his family home and speak to them myself. I told my mother what I intended to do, and she didn't try to stop me. She didn't try to come with me either. I got to their house, and I rang their door buzzer again and again. They had an intercom, so I knew they heard me. In fact, anything I said was audible through the intercom. Realizing this, I began to speak to them. "Excuse me, there's someone in your warehouse. I think someone might be hurt in there." There was no response. I was shaking with adrenaline and fear. I took the plunge and shouted, "Fine, I'll just call the police." As soon as I said that, I got a reply. "There's no one in there. Please go away," the voice said. I couldn't do much else than go home and call the police. Seconds after I left, the wails of their son stopped abruptly, and I never heard them again. Could the rumors just be rumors? Could an animal have gotten in there? I don't know. I didn't know what to do. I never heard him again, and eventually, time passed and I left home. He'll be 30 years old this year, according to my mother, if he's still alive. Is he still out there in that big dark warehouse? I ask my mum as often as I can if she's heard any noises coming from the warehouse, but she says she hasn't. This really plays on my mind. I used to live in a tall apartment block on the highest floor. It was a nice apartment. It had wide rooms, but no second floor. When I moved in, I went to visit my neighbors and introduce myself. I brought them some snacks. One of my neighbors was a sweet old lady, but unfortunately she moved away after a couple of years, leaving her apartment empty for a while. Before long, a man moved in. I don't know exactly when he moved in. He didn't introduce himself. That's fine. Some people don't. I woke up one night to loud noises rousing from next door. I could hear things smashing and a man's voice bellowing. I heard a smaller voice which belonged to a woman. Were they having an argument? It sounded pretty bad in there. Things quickly went silent, and since I was sleepy, I lost interest and fell back asleep. I think about a week or so passed and I heard some more noise coming from next door. They were so noisy, I couldn't get to sleep. I was thinking of calling the realtor or the landlord and complaining about them. I couldn't stand it. Then suddenly, the sounds of a scuffle left the next door neighbor's apartment and spilled into the communal hallway. It sounded as if they were near the elevator. A woman's voice was screaming and pleading. I ran to the door. I saw a man who looked to be in his 30s stood over a woman who looked to be in her 20s. He was beating and kicking her. She was wearing loungewear, sweats. Her hair was all messy, and I saw that she had a nosebleed and she was covered in bruises. He looked as if he had stopped his awful attack, but he had only paused to grab a nearby vinyl umbrella, and he stood over her with it raised in the air. He broke that umbrella. I don't want to say much more. That incident has been burned into my memory. That umbrella was in pieces. Funny how we always know what we should have done if the situation's not our own. Like in a film, I always hated those characters who stopped and did nothing. I never thought I'd be like that myself, but that is now the unfortunate choice I have to live with. I went back inside and grabbed my phone, and I called my mum. I didn't know what to do. She called me an idiot and told me to hang up and call the police immediately. I know my actions were stupid. It's not an excuse, but I was quite young and naive at the time. I called the police. While I was on the phone, I heard more commotion out there, and I watched through the peephole. He dragged that poor woman back into his apartment. When the police arrived, they asked me what had happened. I showed them the broken umbrella and the blood spots on the floor. They went to ask my neighbor about what had happened, and to everything they asked, he just replied, "I don't know." He wouldn't leave his apartment. He just spoke to the police through the intercom. The police left and told me that they would return again if there was any more trouble. I was so shocked. I felt like there was nothing I could do. I was scared too. There was now a monster living next door to me. A few days later, I was eating dinner at home and I heard sounds coming from outside again. I was so worried. I went over and I looked. I was pleased to see that it was a group of police officers. I asked them what was going on. They didn't say anything. They were just going into my neighbor's apartment. I could hear my neighbor shouting and going mental in there. The police were shouting. I couldn't figure out what they were saying though. All those voices were being partially drowned out by all the police radios. I managed to piece together a few parts, and I came up with my own hypothesis based on what I had heard. I think the guy next door was a goddamn junkie. The police were mentioning amphetamines and stimulants when they were shouting at him. I was pretty freaked out. I had no idea that he was on drugs as well. From then on, the next door apartment remained empty. It was nice to have some peace back in the building. This experience taught me not only about the importance of reaction times, but that you can never really know your neighbors. I sometimes wonder if that woman's alright. That's the only thing that's left open-ended. I went to visit my relatives on my mother's side of the family. They lived in the countryside, basically in the middle of nowhere. There was a girl called Saki. She was one of my friends and we both were in the second year of elementary school at the time. I accidentally trapped Saki in an old refrigerator that had been dumped in a vacant plot of land out in the woods. And this is my confession. When I was younger, I would always tease the girls that I liked. I guess that's just the way it is for some kids, huh? It was nothing more than a way to seek attention from girls I liked. We were just playing. It wasn't supposed to happen the way it did, but it did. There were so many things I could and should have done. We found a fridge, and she says, "Do you think I can fit in here?" And I say, "Go ahead and try." And I shut the fridge door on her. I was going to open it right away. I only wanted to give her a little fright, but that's all it was. But the thing is, I couldn't open it. No matter how hard I pulled, I couldn't open it. I realized the significance of the situation when I heard her screaming and banging against the inside of the fridge door. She was screaming, "Open it! Open it!" I just ran. I want to say I ran to get help, but I think I just ran away from the horror of the situation. It was too much to bear. Of course, I ran home with the intention to get help from my parents. The issue is that when I got home, I knew I would be in trouble, and I was wrestling with the right way to tell my parents. I didn't know how much oxygen was in a fridge. I thought it was just like a box or being shut in a closet or something. The minutes turned to hours, and I still couldn't find the right way to tell them what had happened. Then I was eating lunch, and I guess I fell asleep because I remember my parents waking me up from the nap, asking me about Saki. My dad was stood over me looking very angry. "Where is she, boy?" he asked. I'll never forget it. My body was riddled with shudders. It was instantly cold. I instinctively replied, "I don't know." It was already dusk outside, and we had been playing before lunch. No way she's still in there, I thought. That night, a search team of locals was assembled, and they searched the woods and the area. They didn't find her. I was sure that if the search and rescue team couldn't find her, and they searched the area where the refrigerator was, then she must have gotten out. I was certain of it. I mean, it makes sense, right? I thought that she had got lost somewhere in the woods, or perhaps she was kidnapped, both of which aren't my fault, right? For years, I have been convinced that is what happened. The issue is, I think deep down, that's not true. That's why I'm here today, to tell you my story. I needed to get this off my chest because every time I see a closed door or a fridge, my mind replays the sound of Saki screaming, "Open it! Open it!" I went out bike riding with my friend. We were riding kind of fast, faster than walking speed at least. Then from behind us, a woman overtook us. She was riding a bike and was going way faster than we were. Following her, on a smaller bike, was a young boy who looked to be still in elementary school. He looked completely out of breath. Seeing him, my friend and I remembered our childhoods and said, "Ha, looks like he's in training." We watched him try desperately to keep up with his mother. There was a hill up ahead, and his mother slowed down a little as she approached it. Us guys, the little dude included, slowly caught up to her. We heard her address the boy. "Quit breathing like that. That's so gross. Don't you think the way you're riding is just gross? Nobody wants to hear that. You're going to grow up useless. Is that what you want? Are you faking being tired right now? Are you serious? You know soccer players, they can run 10 kilometers on a single breath, and they are much faster than you. This is gross. You're like an old man. Keep grossing me out and you're not getting dinner tonight. Ride your bike properly." She was screaming at him. She threw her bike to the floor. She was hysterical. She began to approach the boy. It was like she didn't care at all about how she looked. Like we didn't exist as far as she was concerned. She had no shame. The boy's eyes were streaming with tears. He was staring up at his mother. She grabbed her son by his shoulders. "So now you're pretending to be sick, and when you get to school, they're going to say you have a fever or something like that, and you're going to miss the first class. You're going to throw up the balanced breakfast I try to give you each day, and then you're going to take a rest with a school nurse until you feel better. Is that the plan today, huh? That's an hour you could be spending on your future, learning. It's a waste of time. You want that? If any of your teachers call the house again, I will be so mad. Do you know how much trouble that causes me? That I should go to school and pick you up. Then, when you go to your cram school later, so help me if they send you home for any of this feeling sick rubbish. I will not accept these excuses anymore. The boy looked up at his mother and kept apologizing. It was too much for my heart to bear. If I was a child, I would be reciting my multiplication tables while riding. I'd get to school faster than you, and I'd get home faster than you too. If I lived life at your pace, I wouldn't come home at all. The mum screamed. Well, my friend and I thought the situation was dangerous, so we rode after the boy and his mother. My friend thought that the kid had vomited based on how she was speaking to him, and he stopped at a vending machine and bought a sports drink, Pocari Sweat, and a water for the boy, while I gave chase. I spoke to the mother while he caught us up. Ma'am, I think your son is quite sick. Mind your business, he's faking it. He's hot because we were riding bikes. You get hot when you ride a bike properly. Don't you have anything for him, like water or a bag at least to be sick into? Anything? I think you're being entirely cruel. What business is it of a stranger like you? She spat the words at me and turned to her son and resumed shouting at him. Now, you wait just a minute here, I called. Then she started shouting about us being criminals and how crimes were being committed. I didn't get it. I guess she said that because my friend was now tending to the boy, giving him a drink. I guess she was implying something unsavory about us for aiding him. My friend knew his stuff. He was into his athletics. He could see how much trouble this boy was in. He had no energy left. The boy couldn't say a single word. He was exhausted. An old man who happened to pass by came over to us. It turns out this parent and child were sort of famous in this area for the same awful reasons we had witnessed. The old man called me over and spoke to me and my friend. What you're doing for the boy is a good thing right now, but what do you think happens to him later? That made me think about how our involvement in this situation might cause further repercussions for the boy. I didn't care. To me, the old man was just as bad for allowing her to do this. I told him he was wrong. He said he knew the situation well, and the police knew the situation too. They had investigated in the past. He said he knew the family by name, and he had reported something like this before, and had a kind of rapport with the police. He said he would report it to the same officer he spoke to last time. I was so angry, and I said, why hasn't anyone done anything about this? My friend, who was cooling the boy's head with the bottle of water, looked just as pissed off as I guess I did. The old man said he knew this kid's dad and he would speak to him. What were the police waiting for? This old guy to do the talking for them? I was so angry. He told me that people in the neighborhood had put in calls to child services, but when they went to investigate, the boy was so scared to leave, he threw a fit and resisted them. Essentially, they had no proof that there was any wrongdoing, and they couldn't take him away. Will it take for this kid to be admitted into hospital before anything is done? I wondered. I feel a terrible sense of injustice. I feel I am just as culpable for what happens to that boy. I would have done more if I saw it now I'm older, or smartphones were a thing. I could have recorded it or something, I don't know. A cynical part of me still believes that reporting it still would have done nothing. It seems like if that kid was kidnapped, the police would have done something, but because he is biologically her son, there's something stopping them? I don't know if that's right. I learned something horrible about the world the day I saw that woman.